When it comes to biblical tales, the driving force behind doing another movie adaptation often resides in the need to tell your own unique version of it. Take a look at Noah, for example. Sure, it was batshit insane and not very good, but Darren Aronofsky wanted to do his own thing with it, and boy did he. One has to respect that. This theory extends to any story, in fact. Why redo what's already been done in film if you're not going to add anything substantial? The Ten Commandments, the story of Moses freeing the Jewish slaves, I'm sure you've all heard of it, has been done at least 3 or 4 eye-catching times in film. Still, the best version that currently exists, for me, is The Prince of Egypt from 1998. As one of DreamWorks' few traditionally animated flicks before it started its Pixar rivalry, Prince of Egypt switches things up a bit, focusing more heavily on the brothers aspect of Moses and Ramses, interpreting the tale as a musical, and using a very early integration of traditional and CG animation to result in some really gorgeous visuals. It still holds up as the most structurally coherent, runtime appropriate version with solid voice acting and, truth be told, great songs. It's entertaining, it's moving, it's a great film, check it out if you haven't. So anyway, here's Ridley Scott taking a stab at the story himself with Exodus, Kings and Gods, and at first it seems like an interesting idea, one which when merged with his direction could easily lend itself to one awesome looking movie. That would be, however, if not for the increasingly alarming lack of personality in his scripts. He's always been a great visual director, make no mistake. Packing his works with awesome set pieces is part of what made films like Alien and Blade Runner work so well. Hell, Prometheus is still technically one of the best movies of 2012, even with its huge flaws. But even with all of those pros, most of, if not all of his latest films, seem to be missing one thing: the colour, the human stuff, the heart. They all just lately seem to be coming off as a little too cold and sterile. Granted, I can't completely blame what is essentially the fault of the script solely on him, but it's happened one too many times now for me to think that he particularly cares about that aspect of his films anymore. Case in point, Exodus, Kings and Gods kinda sucks, and while it happened to be just not bad enough to wind up on my worst of 2014 list, it is still certainly frustrating to see such a rich, potent, and visually ambitious story get reduced to a really boring, unoriginal, no chances taken slog, and leads me to start thinking that my fears that Scott might just not have it anymore may finally have been realised. Turns out the whitewashing of most of its lead characters was the last thing people should have been worrying about. Do beware, by the way, that I won't be particularly sensitive when it comes to spoilers. This story is unbelievably old. It's the time of pharaohs, where Egyptians live well and the Jews, not so much. A king rules all of Egypt with his 2 sons, Ramesses his real son, played by Joel Edgerton, and Moses his adopted son, played by Christian Bale. I'm sorry, but Christian Bale as Moses? When the king wants to pick the new ruler of Egypt due to his bad health, he decides to... Oh, hang on, I'm sorry, I'm afraid we're gonna have to pause the movie, everyone. We've got a pointless action sequence to shoehorn in here. I'm not even kidding, we get a couple of name drops identifying who Moses and Ramesses are, and then the two immediately set off to go and fight someone. At the end of the day, the whole point of it is to be able to stick some action footage into the trailer and pander to the 300 crowd that thinks every biblical/mythological based film must now call for a big fight scene. Following that, Ramesses and Moses soon learn about Moses' true heritage, that he is in fact a Hebrew, and once exiled, Moses tries to find himself far away with a wife and son, but after a stern talking to from God, ends up helping his true people and seeking to free them from Ramesses' reign. You notice how it all sounds as if the movie is simply happening around Moses? Well, not only does the script fail to give Bale anything to work with, but he also turns in the most serviceable performance possible, as if he just showed up, read the lines and went home. Which means when the time comes for the character to voice his disappointment with himself, what he's done, and his struggle to deal with his people still being enslaved, the screenplay has put absolute zero effort into showing this prior to us being told about it, equating to a complete non-translation to the audience. The reason people should be pissed about the whitewashing is because Bale brings absolutely nothing to the table. You don't care about Moses, you don't like Moses, you don't get a sense that Moses even gives a damn about the things that are happening around him, his true people, nothing. So any argument that they just had to cast this guy for his unique performance goes completely out the window. Joel Edgerton at least does a half-decent job as Ramesses, but the film's clunky pacing and awkward structure of the first half means we get barely any time to know or like the guy before we're told he's now the baddie. The screenplay completely squanders the whole brothers as enemies hook that made other interpretations like The Prince of Egypt resonate big time with audiences. We get around 1 or 2 short scenes to dwell in their relationship before it all goes to hell, and not a single one of those has a hint of levity for us to enjoy watching them, or to get us invested in their rivalry later on. What this all really is essentially an excuse to see Scott do his version of each iconic part of the story. How will he do the killing of the newborns? How will he do the burning bush, the plagues, the river of blood, the parting of the seas, etc, etc. Which means we're left sitting through long stretches of lifeless characters spouting exposition and spending our time watching Bale look really disinterested in it all before something remotely interesting finally happens. This then calls attention to the whole reason this even exists. Surely this is where we finally get to see what all the fuss was about, and why we had to sit through so much colourless talky scenes. So far, despite its flaws, the film has looked really good, and I can imagine Scott's depiction of these iconic moments are going to turn out to be the real seller of the film. How wrong I was. I'd love to give the flick props for at least taking one creative liberty whereby God appears to Moses as a small British boy, but all it does is become a contradiction. God talks to Moses through the burning bush in the original text, yet here we have both the bush burning and the kid talking to Moses, which renders the bush null and void, like he just set it alight for the sake of it. Besides that, the movie decides to take the lazy route in going for the realistic versions of all the other iconic moments. While it works in the film's favour at various points, like the plagues being a chain reaction, which I actually kinda liked, it also results in things like the parting of the sea just looking as if there's a dude off screen with a bucket slowly draining it, considering it literally just slowly washes away. Again, that may be an interesting idea. Science could argue that that is how it would have happened in real life, but it's at the sacrifice of something more visually interesting. Exodus shows no creative insight or personal interpretation, and feels like a big waste in almost every aspect. We've got a great visual director, and no clear direction. We've got people in the cast like Ben Kingsley, Sigourney Weaver, and Noomi Rapace, and none of them get any moments to make a proper impression, assuming they don't just disappear after the first act. Hell, Aaron Paul is in this, and we keep seeing him watch Moses talk to an invisible god, implying that he might be losing his marbles, and it goes nowhere. Exodus is dull, humorless, and lacks any resemblance of distinguishable character. So yeah, not very good. Start paying attention to these again, they're kind of important. Cheers for watching guys, and as always if you like this video, you can subscribe to my channel.